The dust from Sarah's grave had barely settled when Franklin Pierce found himself standing in his kitchen at dawn, staring at three pairs of eyes that expected him to know what came next. He had buried his wife 2 months ago in the unforgiving Colorado winter of 1878, and the weight of raising Emma, Lucy, and little Rose alone pressed against his chest like a 1,000-pound stone. The ranch outside Westcliff stretched across acres of stubborn land that demanded constant attention, and Franklin had no idea how to be both mother and father to daughters aged 12, 9, and 6. The morning cold seeped through the wooden walls as Franklin attempted to braid Emma's dark hair, his calloused rancher's hands fumbling with the strands. Sarah had made it look effortless, her fingers dancing through their daughter's hair each morning while humming softly. Now the house sat silent except for the crackling fire and the occasional sniffle from Rose, who still cried for her mother most nights. "Papa, you are pulling too tight," Emma said gently, reaching back to touch his hand. At 12, she had started trying to take on her mother's responsibilities, attempting to cook meals that often burned and comfort her younger sisters when Franklin retreated to the barn to hide his grief. "I am sorry, sweetheart," Franklin said, loosening his grip. His reflection in the small mirror showed a man who had aged years in mere months. At 32, gray had started threading through his dark blonde hair, and lines carved deep around his eyes. He had been a good husband, a decent rancher, but this new role terrified him more than any wild horse or harsh winter ever had. Lucy tugged at his sleeve. "Papa, we need more flour, and Rose needs new shoes. Her toes are poking through." Franklin looked down at his youngest daughter's feet and felt shame wash over him. He had been so lost in his own grief that he had failed to notice. "We will go into town today, all of us." The ride into Westcliff took an hour, the wagon rattling over frozen ground. The San Isabel Mountains stood magnificent in the distance, their peaks white against the pale winter sky. Franklin kept the girls bundled in every blanket they owned, but the February wind still found ways to bite at exposed skin. Westcliff had grown considerably in recent years, the silver boom bringing prosperity and people to the wet mountain valley. The main street bustled with activity, despite the cold, miners and ranchers conducting business, while their families shopped at the general store and mercantile. Franklin helped his daughters down from the wagon, holding Rose's small hand as they walked toward the store. He noticed the pitying looks from townspeople who knew his story, saw the way women whispered to each other behind gloved hands. He hated the attention, hated being the widower with 3 motherless girls, but he held his head high and pushed open the door. The warmth inside the store hit them immediately, the pot-bellied stove in the corner radiating heat. Franklin was making a mental list of supplies when he heard raised voices from the back of the store. A woman's voice, tight with desperation, pleaded with the shopkeeper. "Please, I can work off the debt. I am good with numbers, I can keep books, I can clean, anything you need." "I do not run a charity, miss. You have no money, no references, nothing. I cannot help you." Franklin tried to focus on gathering flour and coffee, but Emma had already moved toward the commotion, her natural curiosity pulling her in that direction. He followed with Lucy and Rose, rounding the corner to see a young woman facing the shopkeeper. She wore a dress that had once been fine, but now showed signs of hard travel and harder times. Her dark hair escaped from beneath a worn bonnet, and even from a distance, Franklin could see she was trembling, though whether from cold or emotion he could not tell. "I understand," the woman said, her voice cracking slightly. "Thank you for your time." She turned to leave, and Franklin saw her face fully. She could not have been more than 25, with striking features marked by exhaustion, and something that looked like despair. Her eyes, a remarkable shade of green, met his for just a moment before she looked away, embarrassment coloring her pale cheeks. She moved past them quickly, her shoulders rigid with the effort of maintaining dignity. "Who was that, Papa?" Emma asked, watching the woman push out into the cold without even a proper coat. The shopkeeper, Henry Morrison, shook his head. "Showed up on yesterday's stage. Name is Miriam something or other. Says she came from Kansas, lost everything in a fire that killed her family. Has not got 2 coins to rub together and no prospects. Probably be frozen in a ditch by tomorrow if someone does not take pity on her." Franklin felt something stir in his chest, something beyond the numbness that had claimed him since Sarah's death. He looked at his daughters, saw Emma's concerned expression, and made a decision that surprised him. "Watch your sisters," he told Emma, pressing coins into her hand. "Buy what we need, I will be right back." He found the woman sitting on a bench outside, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, probably no more than 23 or 24. She did not look up when his shadow fell across her. "Excuse me, miss," Franklin said, his voice rough from disuse. "I could not help but overhear your situation in there." She finally looked at him, those green eyes wary. "I am not asking for handouts." "Good, because I am not offering one," Franklin said. "I am Franklin Pierce. I have a ranch outside town and 3 daughters who need looking after. I need help, and it sounds like you need work. If you are interested, I can offer room and board plus wages." Miriam stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. "You do not know anything about me. I know you are desperate enough to beg for work, but proud enough to refuse charity. I know you have lost people you loved and you are far from home with nowhere to go. That is enough for me to offer you a chance." Franklin surprised himself with his own words. He had not planned this, had not thought it through, but something in her expression reminded him of his own reflection in the mirror that morning. "Why would you do this?" she asked, suspicion mixing with hope in her voice. "Because my wife died 2 months ago, and I am drowning trying to raise 3 little girls alone. Because they deserve better than a father who cannot even braid hair properly or notice when their shoes have holes in them. Because you look like you could use a break, and maybe giving you one will help me feel like less of a failure." The honesty in his words seemed to reach her. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for deception or ulterior motives. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she slowly nodded. "My name is Miriam Norton. I can cook, clean, sew, and tend animals. I grew up on a farm in Kansas before." She stopped, her throat working as she swallowed hard. "Before the fire took my parents and younger brothers." "I am sorry for your loss," Franklin said simply. "When did it happen?" 3 weeks ago. I had been visiting my aunt in town that night, staying over because of the storm, when I came home the next morning." She closed her eyes briefly. There was nothing left but ashes and 4 graves to dig. Franklin felt the familiar ache of grief, the kind that never truly faded but became something you learned to carry. "Then you understand what my girls are going through. Maybe that makes you exactly the right person for this." He helped her to her feet, noting how thin she was beneath the threadbare dress. When had she last eaten a proper meal? He guided her back into the store where his daughters waited with a small pile of supplies. Emma's eyes widened when she saw her father return with the woman. "Girls, this is Miss Miriam Norton. She is going to come stay with us for a while and help around the ranch." Franklin watched his daughters' reactions carefully. Emma looked curious but not unfriendly. Lucy seemed uncertain and Rose hid behind her older sister's skirts. Miriam knelt down slowly, bringing herself to Rose's eye level. "Hello," she said softly. "You must be cold. Would you like to hold my hands? They are very warm." She extended her hands, and after a moment's hesitation, Rose placed her small fingers in Miriam's palms. "They're now better." Rose nodded shyly, and Franklin felt something in his chest loosen slightly. He added more supplies to their pile, including fabric that Emma pointed out could be made into a dress, and a warm coat from the ready-made section that he insisted Miriam accept as part of her wages. She protested, but he was firm. "You cannot help anyone if you freeze to death on the ride home." The journey back to the ranch was quiet but not uncomfortable. The girls whispered among themselves in the wagon bed while Miriam sat up front with Franklin, the new coat wrapped tightly around her. The sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, painting the snow-covered valley in shades of gold and pink. "How long were you married?" Miriam asked quietly, her eyes on the horizon. 10 years. I met Sarah when I was 22 and she was 18. She was visiting her cousin in Colorado, and I was working at a ranch near here. Took me 6 months to work up the courage to ask her father if I could court her. Franklin's hands tightened on the reins as memories washed over him. She was the bravest person I knew. Came out here to this hard land without complaint, gave me 3 beautiful daughters, made a home out of rough wood and determination. How did she? Miriam trailed off, then shook her head. "I am sorry, that is too personal." "Pneumonia," Franklin said. "Started as a cold in December, and within 2 weeks she was gone. The doctor from town came, but there was nothing he could do. She held on long enough to say goodbye to the girls to tell me." He stopped, his throat closing up. Miriam did not push for more. They rode in silence until the ranch came into view, modest buildings set against the dramatic backdrop of the Sangre de Cristo Range. The house was a sturdy 2-story structure Franklin had built himself with help from neighbors, with a barn, chicken coop, and corrals spreading out from the main dwelling. It was not grand, but it was home. Inside, the house bore the marks of motherless months. Dishes were stacked haphazardly, laundry piled in corners, and dust covered surfaces that Sarah would never have allowed to go untended. Franklin saw Miriam take it all in, watched her eyes move from one mess to another, and felt shame heat his face. "The girls share a room upstairs," he said gruffly. "There is a small room off the kitchen that Sarah used for sewing. You can have that. It has a bed and a stove." Miriam set down the bundle of supplies she had carried in. "May I look around, get familiar with where things are, of course." "Emma, show Miss Norton around while I tend to the horses." Franklin escaped to the barn, grateful for the familiar routine of unhitching the wagon and caring for the animals. Out here, he knew what to do. He understood horses and cattle, the rhythm of ranch work, the demands of the land. It was the house, the girls, the endless small needs that defeated him. He had hoped that hiring help would ease the burden, but now he wondered if he had acted too rashly. Miriam Norton was a stranger, someone with her own grief, her own ghosts. What if she could not manage? What if she left? What if the girls grew attached only to lose another woman they depended on? When he finally returned to the house, the sun had set and lamplight glowed in the windows. He could smell something cooking, actually cooking, not burning. Inside, he found the kitchen transformed. The dishes had been washed and put away, the table cleared and set with mismatched plates. Miriam stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot, while Emma pumped water and Lucy set out cups. Rose sat at the table, swinging her feet and chattering in a way Franklin had not heard in weeks. "It will just be soup and biscuits tonight," Miriam said when she noticed him. "But tomorrow I can make something more substantial once I know what supplies we have." The meal was simple but good, and for the first time since Sarah's death, they sat together at the table like a family instead of 4 people lost in their own private grief. Miriam asked the girls gentle questions about their lives, their interests, the ranch. Emma talked about the calves they were expecting in spring. Lucy shared that she loved to draw. Rose just stared at Miriam with wide eyes, occasionally reaching out to touch the woman's sleeve as if to make sure she was real. After dinner, Miriam supervised the girls' bedtime routine with a gentle efficiency that made Franklin's throat tight. She helped them wash up, listened to their prayers, and tucked them into their shared bed with a softness that spoke of practice. When she finally emerged from their room, she found Franklin sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. "I could not get Rose to say her prayers for the last month," he admitted. "She would just cry for her mother. How did you do it?" Miriam sat down across from him, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "I told her that her mother can hear her from heaven, and that prayers are like letters we send to the people we love who are far away. I told her that my mother and brothers get my letters every night, and I know they read them." "Do you believe that?" Franklin asked, looking up to meet her eyes. "I have to," Miriam said simply. "Otherwise, what is the point of going on?" They sat in silence for a moment, two wounded people sharing space in a house haunted by loss. Finally, Franklin stood. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. There is always work on a ranch." Miriam nodded and retreated to the small room off the kitchen. Franklin climbed the stairs to his own room, the one he had shared with Sarah. Her things were still everywhere, her nightgown folded on the chair, her hairbrush on the dresser with strands of her dark hair still caught in the bristles. He had not been able to put anything away, as if doing so would erase her completely. He lay down on top of the covers, fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally claimed him. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that gradually eased the chaos of their lives. Miriam rose before dawn to stoke the fires and prepare breakfast. Franklin and the girls would wake to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, to a warm kitchen and a set table. After breakfast, Franklin would head out to work the ranch while Miriam taught the girls their lessons. She had brought with her a few precious books that had survived because they had been at her aunt's house, and she used them to teach reading and arithmetic alongside practical skills like cooking and mending. Franklin found himself looking forward to coming in for the midday meal, to the sound of voices in the house, to evidence that life continued despite grief. Miriam had a quiet way about her, never pushing too hard, never demanding space she had not been given. But slowly, she filled the empty places in their daily existence. She mended clothes Franklin had not even realized were torn. She organized the pantry and started a sourdough starter for bread. She convinced Lucy to show her drawings, and they were surprisingly good. In the evenings, after the girls were in bed, Franklin and Miriam would sit at the kitchen table. Sometimes they talked about practical matters, the supplies they needed or repairs the house required. Other times, they talked about the past. Franklin told stories about Sarah, about their courtship and early marriage, about the birth of each daughter. Miriam shared memories of her family, of her father teaching her to read, of her younger brothers following her around the farm, of her mother's singing voice. "I was supposed to be there that night," Miriam confessed one evening in late March, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "My father asked me to stay home, said the storm was too bad to travel, but I insisted. I had promised my aunt I would help her with canning, and I was stubborn. If I had been there, maybe I could have done something, woken them up, gotten them out. Or you would have died too," Franklin said quietly, "and then there would be no one to remember them, to say their names, to keep their memory alive." "Some days I think that would be easier," Miriam admitted, tears sliding down her cheeks. "The guilt of surviving is heavier than I expected." Franklin reached across the table and took her hand without thinking. It was the first time he had touched her since that first day in town. Her fingers were cold and he wrapped his own around them, offering what comfort he could. "I understand. I feel guilty every day that I am here and Sarah is not, that I get to see our daughters grow up and she does not." But then Rose laughs at something, or Emma shows me how well she can braid her own hair now, or Lucy draws a picture of all of us together. And I think maybe we owe it to the people we lost to keep living, to honor them by not giving up. Miriam turned her hand in his, squeezing back. They sat like that for a long moment, two people anchored to each other by shared understanding of grief's weight. Then Miriam withdrew her hand gently and stood. "Thank you, Franklin, for bringing me here, for giving me a purpose. I think you saved my life that day in town." "You saved mine too," Franklin said. "Maybe we just saved each other." As winter melted into spring, the ranch came alive with new growth and new life. The calves Miriam had heard about arrived, wobbly-legged and demanding. Franklin taught Rose how to feed an orphaned calf with a bottle, and her delighted laughter rang across the yard. Emma started helping with the morning milking, her competent hands learning the rhythm under Franklin's patient instruction. Lucy sketched everything, filling page after page with drawings of the ranch, the animals, and increasingly detailed portraits of Miriam. Franklin found himself watching Miriam more than he probably should. The way she moved through the house with growing confidence, no longer a guest but a vital part of their daily life. The way she sang softly while cooking, old hymns and folk songs that filled the kitchen with music. The way she smiled when one of the girls accomplished something new, genuine pride lighting up her face. She had gained weight, losing the gaunt desperation she had arrived with, and color had returned to her cheeks. She was beautiful, he realized one day with a start. Not just pretty, but truly beautiful, inside and out. The realization terrified him. He had no business thinking such things. Sarah had been dead less than 6 months. What kind of man was he to notice another woman, to feel his heart speed up when Miriam laughed, to find excuses to be near her? He threw himself into ranch work, taking on tasks that did not need doing just to avoid the confusing feelings that arose whenever Miriam was near. Miriam noticed his withdrawal and tried not to let it hurt. She had grown fond of Franklin Pierce, of his quiet strength and gentle way with his daughters. She admired how hard he worked to provide for his family, how he fought through his own grief to be present for Emma, Lucy, and Rose. She had started to think of this place as home, of these people as her family. But she reminded herself constantly that she was hired help, that this was temporary, that she should not let herself feel too comfortable or want too much. Then came the day in early May when everything shifted. Franklin was breaking a new horse in the corral, a young gelding with more spirit than sense. Emma and Lucy were at their lessons in the kitchen while Rose napped upstairs. Miriam had been churning butter on the porch when she heard the commotion. She looked up to see the horse rear suddenly, its hooves flashing in the sunlight. Franklin lost his grip on the lead rope and fell backward, striking his head on the fence post with a sickening crack. Miriam was running before she thought, vaulting the corral fence in a way that would have shocked her 6 months ago. The horse had bolted to the far side of the enclosure, snorting nervously. Franklin lay still, blood seeping from a gash on his temple. Miriam dropped to her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she checked for breathing, for a heartbeat. Both were there, thank God, but he did not respond when she called his name. "Emma," Miriam shouted toward the house. "I need you." Emma came running, Lucy right behind her. The girls' faces went white when they saw their father on the ground, but Miriam kept her voice calm and firm. "Emma, ride into town and get the doctor. Lucy, Bring me clean cloths and water. Go now, both of you." The girls scattered to their tasks while Miriam carefully cradled Franklin's head in her lap, applying pressure to the wound. He was so still, his face pale beneath the tan. "Do not you dare leave those girls," she whispered fiercely. "Do not you dare leave me. We need you, Franklin Pierce. You have to wake up." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Sarah," he mumbled. The name pierced Miriam's heart, but she pushed the pain aside. "No, it is Miriam. You hit your head. Stay still." "Miriam," he repeated, his eyes clearing slightly. His hand came up to touch her face, his fingers trailing along her jaw. "You are crying. You scared me," she said, tears indeed streaming down her face. "You cannot do that." "Sorry," he murmured, then his eyes closed again. By the time the doctor arrived with Emma, Franklin had regained fuller consciousness but was clearly concussed. The doctor stitched the gash, warning of headaches and dizziness for the next few days. Miriam and Emma helped him into the house and up to his room, where he protested weakly about all the fuss. "Hush," Miriam said firmly. "The doctor said you need rest, so that is what you are going to get." For the next 3 days, Miriam divided her time between caring for Franklin and managing the household. Emma stepped up admirably, helping with meals and watching Rose while Miriam tended to her father. Franklin proved to be a terrible patient, constantly trying to get up and return to work, but Miriam was immovable. She brought him meals, changed his bandage, and sat with him in the evenings, reading aloud from one of her precious books. "You are stubborn," Franklin said on the 3rd day when she had physically blocked the door to prevent him from going downstairs. "So are you," Miriam countered, "but I am meaner, so sit back down." A smile tugged at Franklin's lips despite himself. "Where did you learn to be so fierce?" "I had 3 younger brothers," Miriam said, her expression softening at the memory. "They taught me that if you show weakness, you lose. I learned to hold my ground." "Tell me about them," Franklin said, settling back against his pillows. "You have told me about your parents, but not much about your brothers." So Miriam talked about Thomas, who had been 15 and wanted to be a teacher. About William, who was 12 and could make anyone laugh even in the hardest times. About little Charles, only 8, who had followed her everywhere and called her his best friend. Her voice cracked occasionally, but she pushed through, and Franklin listened without interruption, his eyes never leaving her face. "They sound like they were wonderful," Franklin said when she finished. "I am so sorry you lost them." "I am sorry you lost Sarah," Miriam replied. "She must have been extraordinary to raise such good daughters." "She was," Franklin agreed. "But you are pretty extraordinary yourself, Miriam Norton. My girls love you. I do not know what we would do without you now." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to examine. Miriam stood quickly, smoothing her skirt. "I should check on dinner." "Emma is managing well, but I do not want her to feel overwhelmed." She fled before Franklin could respond, her heart pounding. What was happening between them? When had the careful boundaries they had maintained started to blur? She busied herself in the kitchen, trying not to think about the warmth in Franklin's eyes when he looked at her, the way his voice softened when he said her name. That night, after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, Miriam sat on the porch watching the stars. The spring air was cool but pleasant, carrying the scent of new grass and wildflowers. She heard the door open behind her and knew without turning that it was Franklin. "You should be resting," she said. "I have been resting for 3 days. If I stay in that bed any longer, I will go mad." Franklin lowered himself carefully onto the porch steps beside her, leaving a respectable distance between them. "Besides, I have been doing some thinking." "About what?" Miriam asked, though her pulse quickened with apprehension. "About us. About what you have come to mean to this family, to me." Franklin paused, choosing his words carefully. When I hired you, I thought I just needed someone to help with the girls, to take some of the burden off my shoulders. But you have done so much more than that. You have brought light back into this house. You have helped us all heal, helped us remember how to be happy again. You have done the same for me, Miriam said quietly. I came here broken, with nothing and no one. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to keep going. I care about you, Miriam, Franklin said, the words coming out rough and uncertain. More than I probably should, more than I know how to handle. When I saw you crying over me in that corral when you said we needed me, I realized that maybe I need you too, not just as help with the girls, but as... He trailed off, unable to finish. Miriam's heart felt like it might beat out of her chest. Franklin, I care about you too. So much it frightens me, but Sarah has only been gone 6 months. People will talk. They will say terrible things. And your daughters, they are still grieving their mother. I do not want to dishonor her memory or hurt those girls. What if Sarah would want this? Franklin asked. Before she died, she made me promise something. She said I should not be alone, that the girls needed a mother, that I should not let grief keep me from living. At the time, I could not imagine even looking at another woman. But Sarah was wise. She knew that life goes on, that love does not diminish just because we find it again. Do you love me? Miriam asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Franklin turned to face her fully, his hand reaching out to gently cup her cheek. I am falling in love with you, Miriam Norton. Slowly, carefully, but definitely. I love your strength and your gentleness. I love how you sing in the kitchen and how you never give up. I love watching you with my daughters, seeing how patient and kind you are with them. I love talking to you at night, sharing our grief and our hope. I think I started falling that first day in town when you refused charity but accepted a chance. Tears spilled down Miriam's cheeks, but they were different from the tears of grief she had shed so often. These were tears of possibility, of hope, of the terrifying and wonderful feeling of being seen and valued. I am falling in love with you too, she confessed. I tried not to. I tried to keep my distance, to remember my place, but you made it impossible. You are a good man, Franklin Pierce, a good father, and you have the kindest heart of anyone I have ever known. Franklin leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Miriam did not pull away. She met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like the desperate passion of youth. It was better, deeper, a kiss between two people who understood loss and had chosen to risk their hearts anyway. When they pulled apart, Franklin rested his forehead against hers. I know we need to take this slow. For the girls, for propriety, for us. But I want you to know that my intentions are honorable. I am not looking for just hired help or a convenient solution. I want to court you properly, Miriam, if you will allow it. Yes, Miriam said, a smile breaking across her face. Yes, I will allow it. They sat together on the porch until the night grew cold, talking and planning, their hands intertwined. Inside the house, unbeknownst to them, Emma watched from her bedroom window, a small smile on her face. She had seen the way her father looked at Miriam, had noticed how happy they both seemed when they were together. She missed her mother terribly, would always miss her, but she also wanted her father to be happy. And Miriam made him happy in a way Emma had feared she would never see again. The courtship that followed was conducted with care and respect for propriety. Franklin made sure the neighbors knew that he was courting Miss Norton with the intention of marriage. Miriam continued to sleep in her own room and maintain appropriate boundaries. But everyone could see the change in them, the way they gravitated toward each other, the soft looks and gentle touches when they thought no one was watching. Franklin brought Miriam wildflowers from the meadow, and she blushed like a girl half her age. They took walks together in the evenings after the girls were in bed, chaperoned by the vast Colorado sky. Miriam darned Franklin's socks and made his favorite pie. Franklin fixed the wobbly leg on her sewing table and brought her fabric from town for a new dress. They attended church together on Sundays, the five of them filling a pew, and accepted the knowing looks from the congregation with grace. The girls responded better than either adult had dared hope. Emma declared herself in favor of the match, saying that Miriam already felt like family. Lucy asked if this meant Miriam would stay forever, and seemed relieved when told yes. Only Rose struggled, occasionally calling out for her mother in the night and crying that she did not want a new mama. Miriam never pushed, never tried to replace Sarah in the little girl's heart, but was simply there, constant and patient, until Rose slowly began to accept that loving Miriam did not mean forgetting her mother. By July, Franklin decided he had waited long enough. He was absolutely certain that Miriam was the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with, and he could not imagine his future without her. He enlisted Emma's help to plan the proposal, wanting to do something special that would include all the girls. On a Sunday afternoon, Franklin loaded everyone into the wagon for what he said was a picnic. Miriam had packed a basket of food, curious about Franklin's secretive smile but not pressing for details. They drove to a spot along the creek where cottonwood trees provided shade, and the water ran clear and cool over smooth stones. The mountains rose in the distance, and wildflowers carpeted the meadow in purple and yellow. While the girls splashed in the shallow water, Franklin spread a blanket and helped Miriam sit down. His hands were shaking slightly, and she noticed. "Are you all right?" she asked. "You seem nervous." "I am," Franklin admitted. "Miriam, we have known each other for 5 months now. I know that might not seem like a long time, but I have learned that life is uncertain and we should not waste the time we are given. You came into our lives when we were broken and lost, and you helped put us back together. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being just pieces you were fixing and became something more. You became part of us, and we became part of you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Miriam's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. "Franklin." "Girls, come here," Franklin called, and his 3 daughters hurried over, their faces bright with excitement. They clearly knew what was happening. Franklin took Miriam's hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Miriam Norton, I love you. I love your courage and your kindness. I love how you make me laugh and how you understand my grief without trying to fix it. I love watching you with my daughters, knowing that you love them as your own. I want to build a life with you, a real family. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band. It was not fancy, but it was real and solid and permanent, just like the love he was offering. Miriam looked from the ring to Franklin's face to the 3 girls watching with hopeful expressions. Rose had come to stand beside her, reaching out to touch Miriam's arm. "Will you really be our mama?" Rose asked in her small voice. Miriam gathered the little girl into her arms, tears flowing freely. "I will never replace your first mama, sweet girl. She will always be your mother and she will always love you. But if you will let me, I will love you too and care for you and be here for you always." Rose thought about this, then nodded solemnly. "I think that is okay. Mama would not want us to be sad forever, and you make Papa smile again." Miriam looked at Emma and Lucy, seeing their approval and encouragement. Then she turned back to Franklin, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Franklin, I will marry you. I love you, and I love these girls, and there is nothing I want more than to be your family." Franklin slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. He pulled her close, kissing her soundly while the girls cheered and clapped. The sound of their joy echoed across the meadow, a declaration that life continued, that happiness could be found even after loss, that broken hearts could heal and love again. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Westcliff, on a warm August day with the whole community in attendance. Miriam wore a dress of pale blue that Emma and Lucy had helped her sew, her dark hair crowned with wildflowers that Rose had picked that morning. Franklin wore his best suit, his face shining with happiness as he watched his bride walk down the aisle. There were tears, but they were tears of joy this time. Emma, Lucy, and Rose stood with them at the altar, part of the ceremony, part of the new family being formed. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together on faith and trust. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Franklin kissed Miriam with all the love and hope he had rediscovered through her. The congregation applauded, and they turned to face their community as Mr. and Mrs. Franklin Pierce. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. The church ladies had prepared food, and someone had brought a fiddle for dancing. Franklin swept Miriam into his arms for the first dance, holding her close as they moved to the music. "Happy, Mrs. Pierce?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again," Miriam answered honestly. "Thank you for finding me, for saving me, for loving me." "Thank you for the same," Franklin replied. "We saved each other, remember." As the day turned to evening, they returned to the ranch as a complete family. The girls had been invited to spend the night with a neighbor, giving Franklin and Miriam their wedding night alone. The house felt different as they walked through the door together. No longer two separate people sharing space, but husband and wife beginning their life together. Franklin carried Miriam over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition. He set her down gently in the kitchen, the room where they had shared so many late-night conversations, where they had slowly fallen in love over cups of tea and shared grief. "I love you," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "I love you too," Miriam replied, reaching up to kiss him. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter in both their lives. They came together with tenderness and care, two wounded souls finding healing and hope in each other's arms. Franklin was gentle, mindful that Miriam had never been with a man before, taking his time to make sure she felt safe and cherished. Miriam surprised herself with her own passion, the love she felt for this good man overcoming any nervousness or fear. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed that had once been Franklin and Sarah's, but was now Franklin and Miriam's. The window was open, letting in the cool night air and the sound of crickets. Franklin traced lazy patterns on Miriam's shoulder, his heart full of gratitude for this second chance at love. "I need to tell you something," Franklin said quietly. "I will always love Sarah. She gave me 10 good years and 3 beautiful daughters. Her memory will always be part of this house, part of who I am." "I know," Miriam said, with no trace of jealousy in her voice. "And I will always love my family who died. We do not have to forget them to move forward. They are part of our story, part of what made us who we are. We can honor them by living well, by choosing happiness, by building something good from all this grief." Franklin pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "We found each other," Miriam corrected. "At exactly the right time, when we both needed it most." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, the ghosts of their past settling quietly around them not as sources of pain, but as gentle reminders that love never truly ends. It just changes form and finds new ways to exist. The months that followed were some of the happiest Franklin could remember. Miriam settled into her role as wife and mother with natural grace. The girls flourished under her care, growing in confidence and joy. Emma, at 13 now, had become a capable young woman who took pride in helping run the household. Lucy's artistic talents bloomed under Miriam's encouragement, and she began painting scenes from the ranch that showed real promise. Rose, no longer the sad little girl who cried for her mother every night, became a bright, talkative child who followed Miriam around the house chattering about everything and nothing. Franklin and Miriam grew deeper in their love with each passing day. They learned each other's habits and quirks, their bodies and hearts. They worked side by side on the ranch, Miriam proving herself capable with the animals and unafraid of hard work. She could deliver a calf, doctor a sick cow, and still come in to prepare a meal that made everyone groan with satisfaction. In the evenings, after the girls were in bed, they continued their tradition of sitting together. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they read, sometimes Franklin would play his harmonica while Miriam mended or knitted. Often they would simply sit in comfortable silence, content in each other's presence. And when they climbed the stairs to their bedroom each night, they came together with a passion and tenderness that deepened as they learned each other more fully. By the following spring, Miriam discovered she was with child. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be certain before telling Franklin. On a quiet morning in March, she watched him working in the corral through the kitchen window, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, and felt a surge of love so strong it brought tears to her eyes. This man had given her everything, a home, a family, a future. And now they were creating a new life together, a child who would be part of both of them. That evening, after dinner, Miriam asked the girls to help her with something special. She told them her news, watching their faces light up with excitement. "But we need to surprise Papa," she said. "Can you help me?" The girls threw themselves into the conspiracy with enthusiasm. Lucy drew a picture of their family with a new baby added. Rose picked wildflowers and arranged them in a jar. Emma helped Miriam make Franklin's favorite cake. When Franklin came in from evening chores, he found the kitchen decorated and his entire family grinning at him. "What is all this?" he asked, looking around in confusion. "We have news, Papa," Emma said. Barely able to contain her excitement, Franklin looked at Miriam, saw the joy and nervousness in her expression, and suddenly understood. "Miriam, are you?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "We are going to have a baby, in October, the doctor thinks." Franklin crossed the room in 3 strides and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet despite her laughing protests. "Really, truly, truly," Miriam confirmed. "We are going to have a baby, Franklin." He set her down carefully, his hands moving to rest on her stomach even though there was nothing to feel yet. "A baby," he breathed, wonder in his voice. Then he looked at his daughters. "You all knew before me." "Miriam wanted to tell us first," Emma said, "to make sure we were happy about it." "And are you?" Franklin asked. "Happy about it?" "Yes." All 3 girls chorused. That night, after the celebration had wound down and the girls were finally asleep, Franklin and Miriam lay in bed discussing the future. Franklin's hand had not left Miriam's stomach, as if he could protect the tiny life growing there through touch alone. "Are you scared?" he asked. "A little," Miriam admitted, "but also excited. I have always wanted to be a mother. And now I get to be one twice, once to your daughters and once to our child." "You are already a mother to Emma, Lucy, and Rose," Franklin said firmly. "You have been since the day you started caring for them. This baby does not change that. It just means our family is growing." "I hope it is a boy," Miriam said. "You should have a son." "And it would balance things out a bit," Franklin laughed. "Boy or girl, healthy is all that matters. Though I will admit the idea of a son is appealing. Someone to help with the heavy ranch work when he is older." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Miriam's belly grew round, and she bloomed with the glow of expectant motherhood. The girls fussed over her constantly. Emma taking on more household duties, Lucy drawing pictures of what she thought the baby would look like, and Rose talking to Miriam's stomach and singing songs to her future sibling. Franklin became even more protective, trying to keep Miriam from doing anything too strenuous. She tolerated his hovering with good humor, understanding it came from love and the fear of losing her. But she also stood her ground when he went too far, reminding him that she was pregnant, not fragile. In early October, as the aspen trees turned gold and the air grew crisp with autumn's arrival, Miriam's labor began. Franklin sent Emma racing for the doctor while he tried to keep calm for Miriam's sake. Lucy and Rose were sent to the neighbors, and Franklin held Miriam's hand through each contraction, his heart in his throat. The labor was long and difficult. Hours passed as Miriam struggled to bring their child into the world. Franklin refused to leave her side, despite the doctor's suggestion that he wait downstairs. He had not been present for any of his daughter's births, as was the custom, but he would not leave Miriam to face this alone. He wiped her face with cool cloths, murmured encouragement, and prayed silently for both mother and child. As dawn broke on October 11th, 1879, a baby's cry finally filled the room. Franklin's eyes filled with tears as the doctor held up a squalling, red-faced infant. "You have a son, Mr. Pierce, a healthy baby boy." Franklin looked at Miriam, who was exhausted but smiling. "A boy," she whispered. "We have a son." The doctor cleaned the baby and placed him in Miriam's arms. Franklin sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny person they had created together. The baby had dark hair like Miriam and what looked like Franklin's nose. His little fists waved in the air as he cried, announcing his presence to the world. "He is perfect," Franklin said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Miriam said, "What about Samuel? Samuel Franklin Pierce." "Samuel," Franklin repeated, testing the name. "Samuel Franklin Pierce. It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." He leaned down to kiss Miriam's forehead. "Thank you. Thank you for this gift, for our son, for our family." "Thank you," Miriam replied, "for everything. For finding me, for loving me, for giving me all of this." When Emma, Lucy, and Rose were finally allowed to meet their new brother later that morning, they crowded around the bed with wide eyes and gentle hands. Even Rose, the youngest, seemed to understand that this was a special moment. Samuel was passed from sister to sister, each one marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, his soft hair, his perfect little face. "He is so small," Lucy said in wonder. "You were all that small once," Franklin told her. "Hard to believe, I know." "I am a big sister twice now," Emma said, carefully cradling Samuel. "Once to Lucy and Rose, and now to Samuel too." "And you are wonderful at it," Miriam assured her. "I could not ask for better help." The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting but joyful. Samuel proved to have healthy lungs and used them frequently, especially at night. Franklin and Miriam took turns walking him, rocking him, soothing him back to sleep. Emma, Lucy, and Rose helped where they could, fetching clean cloths or warming bottles of sugar water when Miriam needed a break from nursing. As Samuel grew, his personality emerged. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh, curious about everything around him. By spring, he was crawling, getting into everything he could reach. By his first birthday, he was walking and had started trying to say words. Mama came first, filling Miriam's heart with joy, followed quickly by Papa and eventually mangled versions of his sisters' names. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch prospered under Franklin's hard work and Miriam's capable management. They added on to the house, building a proper sitting room and another bedroom. The girls grew into young women, Emma taking on more and more responsibility as she approached adulthood, Lucy developing her art with dreams of perhaps selling her paintings one day, Rose becoming an avid reader with a sharp mind for figures. Samuel grew into a sturdy boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's steady temperament. He followed Franklin everywhere, learning the ranch work from the time he could toddle. By the time he was 6, he was helping feed the chickens and gather eggs. By 8, he was learning to ride and handle cattle. He was serious about his responsibilities, but had a streak of mischief that kept the household lively. In the spring of 1885, when Samuel was 5, Miriam discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first, and the doctor warned her to take things easy. At 32, she was older now, and her body felt the strain more than before. Franklin worried constantly, but Miriam remained optimistic. They had been blessed so far, and she trusted that this blessing would continue. Their daughter, Grace Miriam Pierce, arrived in November of that year, a healthy baby with blonde hair and blue eyes. Miriam wept when she held her, overwhelmed by the miracle of this child. Franklin, at 41, felt his heart expand once more to make room for this new little person. Emma, Lucy, and Rose, now young women of 19, 16, and 14, doted on their baby sister. Samuel, initially disappointed that his sibling was not a brother to play with, quickly fell in love with Grace's sweet nature. The family was complete, 6 people bound by love and loss, by healing and hope. They were not a family formed in the traditional way, but they were no less real for that. Emma, Lucy, and Rose remembered their mother Sarah with love, but had long since accepted Miriam as their mother too. Samuel and Grace knew only Miriam as their mother, though they grew up hearing stories about the brave woman who had come before, who had given birth to their older sisters and shaped their father into the man he became. Franklin and Miriam's love deepened with each passing year. They had their disagreements, as all couples do, but they worked through them with patience and respect. They supported each other through hard seasons on the ranch and celebrated together during prosperous ones. They watched their children grow with pride and worked to provide them with opportunities for good lives. Emma married at 21, a steady young man who owned a ranch near Westcliff. They gave Franklin and Miriam their first grandchildren, twin boys who became the light of everyone's lives. Lucy moved to Denver to study art, eventually gaining recognition for her paintings of Western landscapes. She never married, content with her art and her independence, but she visited often and wrote letters full of news and love. Rose became a teacher in Westcliff, educating the town's children with patience and skill. She married at 25 and had 3 daughters of her own, continuing the family tradition of strong Pierce women. Samuel grew into a fine man, taking over much of the ranch work as Franklin aged. He married a young woman named Catherine whom he met at church, and they built a house on the property, keeping the ranch in the family. They had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, who filled the ranch with laughter and energy. Grace, the baby of the family, grew into a beautiful and spirited young woman who had inherited her mother's kindness and her father's determination. She eventually married a lawyer from Colorado Springs, though they visited the ranch often. As Franklin and Miriam grew older, they found themselves surrounded by the family they had built together. Sunday dinners became large, chaotic affairs with children and grandchildren crowding around multiple tables pushed together. The house rang with conversation and laughter, with the sounds of life lived fully and well. On a summer evening in 1895, Franklin and Miriam sat together on the porch as they had so many times before. Franklin was 61 now, his hair completely gray, his body feeling the wear of decades of ranch work. Miriam was 42, still beautiful to him, still the woman who had captured his heart that cold February day in Westcliff 17 years earlier. "You ever think about that day we met?" Franklin asked, reaching for Miriam's hand. "I think about it often," Miriam admitted. "How lost I was, how certain I was that my life was over. And then you appeared, this quiet rancher with 3 grieving daughters, and offered me a chance." "Best decision I ever made," Franklin said. "Well, second best. First was marrying Sarah, but you are a very close second." He smiled to show he was teasing. Miriam laughed, squeezing his hand. "Sarah would have liked you taking that chance, I think. She wanted you to be happy, wanted the girls to be cared for." "I have always felt like we had her blessing." "I think we did," Franklin agreed. "I think she sent you to us, in a way, at exactly the right moment when we all needed each other most." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, they could hear Samuel calling to his children, the sound of young voices responding. Inside the house, Grace was helping Catherine prepare the evening meal, their conversation drifting through the open windows. "We built something good here," Miriam said softly. "Out of all that pain and loss, we built something beautiful and lasting." "We did," Franklin said, pulling her close to his side. "We saved each other, Miriam. And then we built a life together that was worth saving each other for." As darkness fell and the stars came out, they remained on the porch, 2 people who had found each other in the depths of grief and had chosen to climb back into the light together. They had loved and lost, grieved and healed, built a family from broken pieces and made it whole. Their story was not the tragic tale it could have been, but rather a testament to the resilience of the human heart, to the power of love to transform and redeem, to the truth that endings can also be beginnings if we are brave enough to take the chance. Franklin Pierce and Miriam Norton Pierce lived many more years together, watching their children and grandchildren flourish, seeing the ranch pass to the next generation, growing old side by side with grace and gratitude. When Franklin finally passed peacefully in his sleep at 73, Miriam mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been given 35 good years together, had built a legacy of love and family that would continue long after they were gone. Miriam lived another 12 years, surrounded by the people she loved, before joining Franklin in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. She was laid to rest beside him, her headstone bearing the words "beloved wife and mother," alongside the dates of her life. Near them rested Sarah Pierce, the first Mrs. Pierce, her stone reading "beloved wife and mother," never forgotten. The 3 of them, connected by love and loss and the man they had both loved, at peace together. The ranch continued to thrive, passed from Samuel to his sons, remaining in the Pierce family through generations. The story of Franklin and Miriam became family legend, told to children and grandchildren as an example of how love can heal even the deepest wounds, how families can be built from loss and grief, how second chances can be just as precious as first ones. In the end, what had started as 2 broken people finding each other in desperation became a love story for the ages. Franklin Pierce, the widower with 3 daughters, and Miriam Norton, the woman who lost everything, had saved each other slowly, carefully, beautifully. They had taken their shattered pieces and built something whole, proving that even in the harsh landscape of the Wild West, even after tragedy struck, love could bloom again. Their legacy was not just the ranch or the children or the grandchildren, but the proof that healing was possible, that broken hearts could mend, and that the courage to love again after loss was the greatest bravery of all. The sun set over the Colorado mountains as it had for countless evenings, casting its glow over the ranch that Franklin and Miriam had built together. The house still stood strong, filled with new generations of Pierces who carried forward the values of hard work, family, and love that their ancestors had instilled. And if, on quiet evenings, it seemed that two ghostly figures could be seen sitting on the porch holding hands, well, perhaps that was just the way the light fell. Or perhaps it was Franklin and Miriam, still together even in death, still watching over the family they had created from grief and loss, and the slow, patient work of healing each other's broken hearts. Their story was complete, their ending happy, their love eternal. They had found each other when they needed it most, built a life together that honored both their pasts and their futures, and left behind a legacy that would continue for generations. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, of the vast Colorado sky, of the human heart's infinite capacity for resilience and hope. And it was real as the mountains and the ranch and the family that grew from two wounded souls who dared to love again.